Hi, everybody, and welcome to this week's edition, a special edition of Straight Talk with Bren O'Brien and Tim Rowe from the Straight, sponsored by Inglis and Darley. We're coming to you live from the Warwick Hotel, Tim. We've had to abandon our normal plans and get here for a late dinner. But before we get to that dinner, we'll reflect on a little bit interesting Easter sale. I guess you hear from Sebastian Hutch in a minute. It was a bit of a divided market, and I think there was, there were some very positive stories the other day, but probably a few question marks as well.
Anytime there's 145 plus million turned over, we can't say it was a bloodbath or anything like that. There was $26 million lot. So we're not talking down the industry or the market or anything like that. But Sebastian, by his own admission, set high standards in the Inglis team. So was down on last year despite more horses being catalogued. So we've got to sort of recognise that, and same as Magic Millions in January as well. With they had fewer horses, but also turnover was down. Just seems to be that the top end of the market, there's a lot of still a lot of money there, and then this sale was held. Got to acknowledge the Middle East crisis and conflict and fuel prices and things like that. So there's always outside influences, but still a solid sale.
Yeah, if you look back through it, I mean, it was a record average, $463,111 as it stands at the moment. Medium at $350. Gross, as you mentioned, about $145.9 million. I think probably what stood out to me is the pass in. I think last year there were 41 horses passed in. As things stand at the moment, there was 100 passed in. It is a more selective market, isn't it, Tim? Especially, people aren't willing to pay significant amounts of money, i.e. average of $463,000 for horses that they're not 100% happy with.
What I noticed was probably the speculators, and again, Sebastian touches on this, or put the question to him, that there was quite a few trainers that normally buy one or two at a sale like this that I didn't see them on the buyer's sheet. Some of those good Victorian and New South Wales stables and just couldn't get on the board, couldn't buy the horses they were happy with, or didn't have the budget, or didn't have the confidence to sell down.
Yeah, and if you look back through, obviously there was a couple of stallions that stood out. We had the Extreme Choice Colt, who sold yesterday for $3 million. And the Two Darn Hot today, as well as the Extreme Choice Colt today, both sold for $2.2 million. I mean, the premium for those top-end horses is very, very strong. I think, from memory, Extreme Choice had $7 million lots on the week. It was quite an amazing result for him. But, for those top-end colts in particular, there's a great demand for those, wasn't there?
Well, you only have to see Guest House sold for $30 million. There's probably going to be some other, the sizes this weekend, Champagne 2 weeks after that. If Colt wins those, there's going to be probably some more stallion deals done. I'd bet on that. And so there's, if you get it right or you get one, you can get your money back pretty quickly. But it is a high stakes market and, high stakes gamble, I guess, to get it right. And, those guys, generally over the period, Coolmore and so forth, have got it right.
Yeah, and I think probably the positive aspect of it, and the first interview we'll have will be from Simon Marsh. We spoke to Johnny McKeever as well, the man we know well, probably in this very setting, to have a chat about over a few beers and talk about the day. But I think what was interesting was, there is a connection with this horse. Obviously, the Two Darn Hot of Enbar, obviously a full brother to Two Darn Lizzie that they bought, but a terrific pinhawk result for Stephen Party as well, and SP Bloodstock, who were able to turn a $775,000 investment into where we go what was a $2.2 million result.
Just on Johnny, he did say I asked him when we're going to catch up for a drink. He said when the sun goes down, so I'm just waiting for daylight savings to end.
Excellent. And here's what Simon Marsh had to say, first of all, about Two Darn Hot's reappearance in Australia, which is probably a significant moment to get that horse back.
Two Darn Hot, he obviously gave him a rest a couple of years ago, coming back this year? Or?
Yeah, the intention is obviously to bring him back. Everything's got to be right for him to come back, and as long as he's healthy and happy and he's got through his season in the Northern Hemisphere fine, then the intention is obviously to bring him back. We covered the most incredible book of mares last year, so we're very happy with him, and we'll restrict him in numbers like we did last year. He covered 108 mares here last year, and we'll restrict him to the same kind of numbers this year.
On Two Darn Lizzie, I remember the story that you said, make sure you buy, but don't spend too much, but don't overdo it.
Yeah.
Was it a bit the same with this guy?
Yeah, it was, but I think it was good. I was here and I had Madeline on the phone, so at least we had everybody on the same page. And we were really lucky with Two Darn Lizzie, so let's hope we can be lucky with this colour.
Have you been blown away with the success of Two Darn Hot in Australia?
Yeah, I mean, it's both here and in the northern hemisphere. He seems to just go from strength to strength, and no, I mean, it's an extraordinary ride we're on with him, and long may it continue.
Yeah, interesting to listen to that. And of course, the other big result for today, the second day of the result, was looking back through James Harron and Coolmore coming together. The old James Harron used to work for Coolmore back in the day for $2 million for the full brother to Switzerland, of course, Coolmore Stallion. The other one, the Extreme Choice Geezer Goddess, sold YLR and Matt Laurie Racing for $2 million. But it was interesting to hear sort of James, who probably had struggled to get away into this top end of the market through the week, had to come together with his old mates at Coolmore to get the deal done, Tip.
I could only find one other example of those two Colts groups coming together. So Zambezi River, I think his name was, and did win a stakes place. Quite a good horse, but didn't, he's obviously not a stud, so he didn't, but he was still a talented horse. And there was always going to be a lot of competition for the brother to Switzerland, and they worked out a partnership and probably cost Arrowfield, potentially $500,000.
Yeah, and here's what James Harron had to say about that very, very appealing colt.
James, pedigree's there for everyone to see.
Yeah, look, he was, pedigree aside, we just thought he was an awesome horse. Real beautiful colt. Obviously, the mare's done a fantastic job. And, we're just delighted to be able to get a horse of that caliber, and great to team up with Coolmore, and he'll go to Chris Waller and try and do it all again.
It's not the first time we've teamed up for, but how did this deal come about?
Oh, look, we're obviously great friends and we've got a great relationship, and I just loved the colt, and we had a chat with the guys and sort of said, why don't we get together instead of taking each other on this particular horse? It made a lot of sense, and it's really good to do it. We've been friends for a long time. I used to work there, and we've got a great relationship, so hopefully we're going to have a bit of luck with this horse.
Physically, does he look similar to Switzerland and the rest of the family?
Yeah, well, look, obviously the guys bought Switzerland. They did a great job buying him, and I think this has been the nicest one, in my opinion, since Switzerland. Just a beautiful animal, and she seems to be doing the job every year. Lame mares are running at crazy strike rate for the broodmare sire, and to get a physical like this from such a great farm in Arrowfield as well, it just puts a lot of ticks in your corner.
Did you start the chat with Coolmore after you realised you were both going to be alone?
No, we just look. It was I was just sitting last night thinking about the horse, and I always think that the horses you should be trying to buy are the ones that make you think and keep you up at night, and he was one of those horses. And I just had a chat with the boys this morning, and yeah, we were both on board with the idea, and yeah, it's great to do a bit of business together. We've obviously done a lot through the years.
What have you made of the market the last couple of days? Seems top, very, very strong.
Yeah, it's super strong. It's very good to see the quality end of the market being. There's great depth to the buying bench. There's beautiful animals being presented. I think everyone should walk away feeling very buoyant about the industry, really. If you brought a really nice, well-bred horse here, which is what they're trying to achieve, the best of the best, you got very well rewarded. And we've been buying and selling, and it's been a great sale for us, so we're very happy.
Yeah, so sort of coming off the back of that, and a couple of the big players in the market. We're talking about people playing on the $2 million mark, all that sort of stuff. It was really interesting to talk to Sebastian Hutch. There was a sense of disappointment. We know Sebastian's got very high standards and what he expects from a sale, but despite the fact that we're it's a record average, the gross was probably maybe $8 million off the overall record. They expected to sort of smack it out of the park. There probably are some external factors, but probably some internal factors they'll focus on as well in terms of what they've done for Inglis, Tim.
Well, they did go the bigger catalogue, and Sebastian, by his own admission, and on the record, is saying he goes for, the aggregate is the main one. They get paid on commission, and they just probably didn't live up to expectations. But, we're not sticking the knife in by any means. It was a very solid sale, and as there's a high number of fillies there that, vendors want to hold on to. And just some of those stallions that, it is a stallion sell horses, and some that probably weren't highly commercial at the moment or right at the top of the tree. Just, the vendors had higher values on them than what the buyers did.
Yeah, and I think some of the vendors in particular, some vendors did really, really well and were really happy. There were a couple that were unhappy or not as happy, I suppose, with how things panned out. But I guess that's just the way things work in this business, that, you're at the top end of the market, you have high expectations. But, really interesting chat with Sebastian Hutch about sort of where he felt the sale sat at. Sebastian, I mean, you look at the stats, there's some extremely positive things, and there's probably a few things you might want to improve on. And what's your feel about sort of where we ended up, as the stats look now, how the sales sort of panned out? There was, obviously some great highlights, but also some challenges in the market.
Yeah, I think my prevailing emotion at this stage is I'm very proud of the effort that our team has put into the whole sale. I mean, fundamentally, there are two pieces to the puzzle to putting together a sale. The first part is consolidating the catalogue, and I feel like our team did a really fantastic job putting together what has been universally perceived to be a very strong catalogue of yearlings, and a number of those are sold accordingly. And then obviously the second part of that, and arguably more important, is the promotion of the catalogue and the canvassing of buyers for the sale. And again, I feel like we've done a really great job, particularly in the last couple of weeks, in trying circumstances. I mean, I feel like I was fairly vocal about the fact that I was apprehensive about a variety of different factors in advance of the sale. We're very aware of the challenges that the war in the Middle East was likely to, the knock-on effect to that, to the market, and the approach of buyers. And in many respects, that has been a big factor here. I mean, there are lots of little things we'll look at. I mean, I think the primary thing we'd like to have improved is the clearance. I mean, we talk about the two things being important, the clearance and the gross. You have good clearance, that helps drive the gross. Clearance is off where we would like it to be, and hence the gross is off where we'd like it to be. That'll improve tonight and into tomorrow, but the market forces or market sentiment has ultimately hindered the sale from getting to where it probably should have gotten to.
Was it the segment of the market where, middle to lower end particularly, where they're the horses that probably trainers would generally speculate on and then have to go on sell, where above that, people will probably pay you in 30 or 60 days, and they're already sold in some ways.
I look at all levels of the market. Confidence is a fairly right. Oh, it's still going. Confidence is crucially important. I mean, whether it's for vendors or for buyers, and ultimately it would appear that buyers, or certain profiles of buyers, just weren't that confident coming into the sale, given all that's going on. And as a consequence, we're more discerning, more selective, more particular, less inclined to want to be forgiving of any little vetting issues. And you combine that with the profile of the catalogue. I mean, we noted in advance of the sale that we had more colts and fillies, more fillies and colts. Given the profile of a lot of those fillies, there were a certain percentage of the fillies that didn't sell that vendors just weren't inclined to want to sell unless they hit a certain number. And that's entirely understandable with fillies. It's hard to buy mares. It's hard to develop pedigrees. So if they weren't getting the money they wanted for a filly, they were happy to keep it. It's not always the case with a colt. And yeah, I mean, I don't, as I sit here, I don't necessarily feel like it affected any particular part of the market. It's just a confidence thing.
Yesterday you mentioned to us that there was, or in pre-sale, that there was some international buyers that you thought would get on the sheet that probably hadn't been identified. Did they end up buying? Were there some buyers that you didn't thought might that didn't?
Well, the volume of people who didn't buy relative to inspections. I mean, you sit and listen to Henry Field talk about the volume of inspections they did, or Anthony Thompson, or Arfield, or any of these places. There's a lot of inspections, a lot of people here who didn't buy. I mean, for a variety of different reasons. Most people said that it was just near on impossible to buy the horses they liked, such was the strength of the market. But in terms of significant results, I mean, having Sunbay buy their first yearling in Australia at the Inglis Easter yearling sale is a big deal. Credit to Will Johnson. That's a relationship that he's developed. So to have Nerlin Bitsakoff and his family involved in Australian racing and the Australian yearling market's pretty great. Yesterday we had Peyton Boersma buy the first Australian yearling for the Flying Dutchman. They're one of the biggest investors in the US in the last 2 or 3 years. That's a big deal. I mean, they're two very significant new investors. For Watership Down and their partners to scale up their investment in the manner that they did here, again, was a big deal. It was real, real testament to the sale, or a compliment to the sale, to have Lady Lloyd Webber here for the sale, which was great. People like that, it enhances the sale. I mean, there'll be other people. We had a number of new Asian buyers participate in the sale, particularly late in the day today. Amy Feng has brought in a couple of new Chinese buyers who would have liked to have attended, but visa restrictions meant they couldn't. I mean, that's probably something separate for us to try and work on. But yeah, I mean, there are lots of things, as you said at the start, to be pleased about, and yeah.
You look back through and, I mean, as things stand, I think there's 101 horses passed in this year compared to 47 last year. When do you talk to your vendors about where things sit and whether they sit? Do you talk to them in the next couple of days? Do you wait to sort of things to settle? I mean, what feedback are you expecting from them about where the sale sits and sort of how you push forward with that?
Oh, we get feedback during the sale, get feedback tomorrow. I mean, we'll ask for feedback in the coming days. Very proactive about that, and a number of vendors are very constructive about how they volunteer that. I mean, like anything, it takes a few days to actually digest the facts. I mean, you can have your instinctive sentiment around it, and then you can have well-considered, well-researched opinion. The latter obviously takes some time to consolidate. We'll have our own debrief about the sale, about what we felt worked well and what we felt didn't. I mean, ultimately, we've run a very good sale. I mean, I have no doubt that it had been a stonking good sale under a normal set of conditions. Just didn't have anything closely resembling a normal set of conditions. So, I'd love to have caught a lucky break. And we talked about last year, we felt like we'd a nice enough run through the sales, and we probably had a reasonable run through the sales at this point of the year, and then being hit with the war in the Middle East, which has made it more challenging because of the effect on sentiment.
And so that's it from Easter, Tim. It's been an enjoyable few days up here in Western Sydney. Look, I think, given everything that's going on in the world, given this spike in fuel prices, given everything that's happening, the bloodstock market should be relatively pleased with how it's got out of this year of selling. We ended 2026. I know there's a couple of yearling sales to come, including the national sale, but primarily most of the business has been done. And I think the vendors would be happy that they got the dealing done, knowing what's to come forward. And we don't know what's going to happen. Like, there's some broader challenges globally in the world where things sit. But I think overall, it sits roughly on comparison where we were last year, which would be a pretty good result. If we sat there at the start of January and thought, where are we going to be? They probably would have ticked the box, wouldn't they?
I think so, and what it probably says is that high-end bloodstock holds its value, and it'll flow through to the mare's sales. Chairman's catalogue, I think, is online, and Magic's won't be far away. There's not actually that many mares on the open market, the yearlongs, and that have bought a lot of horses privately. So if you've got a very nice mare, I'm sure they'll get very well paid, because just though breeding out of nice mares tends to get well paid. Obviously, it's a huge investment, long-term play, but you can get a nice mare made to the right stallion, as Easter showed, Magic Million showed in January. There's big returns at that top end of the market.
So thanks for taking the time to listen to our special Easter edition of Straight Talk. We'll be back later on this week to chat through all the biggest news in racing, wagering and breeding. Thanks for your time. Thanks to our wonderful sponsors, Inglis and Darley, and we'll speak to you later on the week.